Exertus.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Join us on another exciting adventure of Exertus.
Bienvenido Exertus. So come with me and let's take a quick adventure into the world of Strasbourg and the Dancing Plague, shall we? So I'm in my plague mask and I'm doing my laissez airfare and I'm wearing my rainbow glasses just to make sure that everyone knows that they can find out about Exertus Tartaria.
Good luck, take care.
And I'm in a bird mask, so I'm pretty sure I'm freaking people out. Or maybe it's the tall hat. And I read the impeccably clear details where I'm led by the escalator to the airplane. I immediately think of that movie Fly Away Home from 1996 about the Canadian. And she sort of reminds me of the proto-Greta Thunberg. And her father is a patent Agenda 21 character, played by Jeff Daniels. And their family are trying to protect the fallout from the collapse of the old-growth forest, which included 15 geese eggs, which, because of deforestation and problems which have been done to the world, require just a little bit of extra help by man. And all of this came out about 2 or 3 years after Agenda 21. And Agenda 21, or the Rio Earth Summit, was a United Nations program of action, which can be considered as the continuation and an unfinished episode in the Bilderberg and United Nations Secretary General's high-level panel on global sustainability. Agenda 21 made it possible for Agenda 2030. It came with the post-nader concepts of the Codex Alimentarius. The Codex Alimentarius is an important book to remember. It's the encyclopedia on chemicals and processes made possible, considered acceptable for international food production. It is the modification and digitization of your produce and vegetables as well as meat products. It is legally and not accurately similar, and it would be my first place of speculation if I were to look into things to consider in terms of effects to look forward in the future. Now, Agenda 21 was created by a number of long-haired, interesting people, some of them with quite a bit of positive notoriety, and I wouldn't even doubt some of them earnesty as well. Members of the Agenda 21 Summit, as well as the writing staff, included Foreign Affairs and Prime Minister of Australia Kevin Rudd, Susan E. Rice, Permanent Representative, United Nations and Cabinet President of the United States, Yukio Hatayama, Member of the House of Representatives of the former Prime Minister of Japan, James Balsillie, Chair of the Board of the Center for the International Governance of Innovation Canada, and founder for the Center for International Governance Innovation, and the Institute for New Economic Thinking, an organization founded by George Soros. And last but not least, Jordan Peterson was the advisor for Balsillie while he was working on the panel. Peterson stated, "I worked on the UN Secretary General's High Panel for Sustainability, report that was delivered, I believe, in 2013, and rewrote the underlying narrative to strip out most of the ideological claptrap." Now, if you can't understand why Jordan Peterson would have anything to do with Agenda 21, or sustainability, or particularly altering a document, which to say he removed the ideological claptrap, quote unquote, does not exactly say what about the problems of the article he had a problem with, and certainly the changes to Agenda 21, let alone the additions of Agenda 2030 and the ID 2020 program, do not show much improvement from the original Soros design. Now, it's really hard to ask Jordan Peterson about things like this, let alone immediately while, and my heart goes out to him, he's on the island or whatever's going on with his benzo addiction, and I don't mean to sound unsympathetic, because I completely understand how, after telling everyone how to change their life, it is not making his life any better, and he still is having problems and is now a chemical addict. And it is admirable to tell people to wash their hands and clean their room and to get a job, and at least perhaps. However, one cannot help but look at the Slavoj Zizek incident and see that Jordan Peterson's meticulous blunder in the debate with Zizek was an apparent de facto advocacy for Marxism in the 21st century. However, like I've said, I know a number of people that would have tried to help with any environmental cause, let alone an agenda for the 21st century, as seemingly innocuous as a title like that might have sounded. Though by 2013, it should have been pretty clear what Agenda 21 was, as it had been around for over 20 years. Still, I just provide that information because I think it's important to know that. Anyway, moving right along. Speaking of other interesting organizations, in one of my many open tabs, I figured it was worth bringing up after we had talked about Dragnet and the psychedelic movement and the involvement with the CIA and the psychedelics, about the current program MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. MAPS, a program which is headquartered out of Santa Cruz and funded by George Soros, participating and allied with the George Soros-funded marijuana movement and the George Soros-funded Drug Policy Alliance. This interesting article on the MAPS website about the foundation of MAPS and MAPS in the media talks about the phenomena of the social psychedelic promise. And even though I completely see the benefit of MDMA therapy for the post-traumatic stress patients from Iraq war victims to the simple practicality of cannabis treatment over opioids, and indeed the efficacy of using a single treatment to change things as opposed to continued reliance on the same pharmaceuticals over and over again, even I still, looking at the George Soros MAPS paperwork, get the heebie-jeebies. Don't think I'm saying that they're good or they're bad. I'm just saying that they're important. I'm just saying there's a lot more going on. I'm just saying the stuff is heavier than anyone's taking it. And I'm just saying you should think about it just a little bit more. So on to the Umbrella Corporation and Raccoon and Corona and the Anagram, and everybody's already talked about this, I hope. And if you haven't already noticed that, you probably should have seen that in the first day, and shame on you for not looking for things like that. This was pretty obvious. The problem is you shouldn't be looking for things like that. So if you did see it, shame on you for looking for it, and start closing your eyes. Just kidding. But seriously, you don't want to look for things like that and have them start appearing just to impress you. Though it seems like a lot of people were a lot more gung-ho in 2020 than they were before. Then again, in 2012, we sure were playing with a lot of video games. And Resident Evil, yeah, that movie series too. If you didn't want to play the game, they just made sure that you saw that movie series. They just made sure that you saw that movie series. Did you see that movie series? Did you not? Did you see the second one? The third one? The fourth one? You didn't see it, did you? I only saw the first one. I couldn't imagine seeing more. But now there's going to be a bunch of people in the Recent Tartarians Discord that says, dude, you need to see all of the Resident Evil movies. And I'm going to say, yeah, probably. But plague stories are as old as time. And the trick's always been the same. Keep your viruses in a cold environment where they can't spread. Make sure to have lots of salts of tartar, sodium bicarbonate, potash, and almonds alkalize the blood, and tomato juice goes good on a plane. I'm not sure if that's useful information, but in case you wanted to know. Just whatever you do, make sure that you have tons of vinyl 432 Hz records, particularly a polka section will get you through. I happen to luck out here in the Anahata Heartland chakra with everything from Polka Party to Polka Party 2, which, if you can't already tell, was a lot more serious-minded polka than the Playful Polka Party, a similarly monochrome vinyl once filled with the promise of a scantily clad Oktoberfest, now with more responsibility and stoicism. And when you're polka'd out, if there even is such a thing, don't you worry, there's a ton of rare Charlie Pride as well. And Highland bagpipes. Did I mention the Highland bagpipes? Just a lone Scotsman on a hill doing his bagpipe thing. In the new Doolittle movie, the octopus is silent and says snitches get stitches, but the bagpiper, at the end of the dragon scene, spoiler alert, tipping the scales of the dragon, Dr. Doolittle pulls a dragon open from the stomach, basically using Reiki, and removes a set of bagpipes. That's how deep inside you bagpipes get. And I do recommend everyone start wearing plague masks when they fly. I mean, it just seems so much more fun, and nobody seems that afraid exactly, just confused really. In fact, all the children are sure that you're a wizard, and that's good because you want to make sure that you're clear and honest with children. But now I do, after thinking about the Reshef of Ebla, Ebola-chan plague meme, just a little bit more aware of the synchronicity of the fact that the day that I wore the plague mask while flying in the airplane is the same day as the first quarantine patient for the coronavirus. And I do like synchronicity, but I don't always love it. Though in fact, I don't think it's fair to say that anyone was some sort of Nostradamus about this. Like we said before, it's just somewhat intuitive. I think everyone knew a plague of some kind was coming. And though we're in some pretty peculiar circles, lending hip-hop stars in New York City plague masks back around Halloween in November might have been slightly more influential than I originally thought. Symbols do make their way into the adolescent consciousness, where they seem to imprint themselves, like the memories of flight or feeding from a mother goose. And when properly guided and imprinted, these geese will fly south for the winter. Concurrently, there was much propaganda about the origins of the coronavirus. Of course, some of the first articles were about a sort of bat soup, a plausibly vegetarian propaganda, or maybe just xenophobia, referring to the Chinese and their peculiar dietary habits. Not so much information, though, on the continued extortion and genocide, sterilization, and general ethnic cleansing of the Uyghur people, whose children are being stolen, men are being castrated and murdered and sent to slave camps where their organs are being harvested, and PRC soldiers from Han families are being stationed in the very beds of the widowed brides and forced to bear new ethnically cleansed children. An event, again, that has been repeated in history many times before.
Mentioning organ transplants. Well, they've been accused of harvesting organs from the... Look, it doesn't matter. They just said no to the organ stuff.
But thinking about the recent symbolism from Valencia and around the world of the mosquito, Draco, Dracula, and the bat, I can't help but think, is this more than just some vegetarian propaganda? Is this actually a ritual or some sort of meme magic? Soups made of bats and snakes definitely seem sinister and strange. And yeah, you can be okay with anybody's culture. You don't have to like someone's torturing a bat. I mean, that's just kind of crazy to eat a bat that's alive. I mean, boiled in soup? Like, really? Okay, whatever, but whoa. I mean, usually I'm like super tolerant, right? But super in the sense of beyond tolerant. But at the same time, how would you feel? That's an important question to remember. Empathy is probably the most important thing. And I don't think I would like this if I was a bat. Then again, there are probably all kinds of circumstances, and maybe the life of a bat in China is intense. And going out like a well-loved dog that's been trained and played with for a season, but then harvested and eaten with ramen. Maybe instead of waiting to die old, being harvested in their youth is somehow better. I don't know, but it's not a choice that I would make for them. But that's just one crazy opinion from a kooky guy in a bird mask. But South Park did warn us, talking about the man-bear pig, the messenger, the beast Winnie the Pooh, and Piglet. And it could be any man. And with nearing 100 million people under quarantine in China, where cars have been forbidden from driving, and yet many better isolated Chinese have found their way across the seas to other places like New York City, and cases of the coronavirus have started popping up all around the world, in some of the darndest places. It could have been that the Matrix is already too confusing for people as it is, but I didn't get nearly as many silly looks as I would have expected. Though it could have just been that people thought I was in some sort of a band, or some sort of weird hipster with some stupid YouTube channel. But I got the feeling, especially from some of the more frequent travelers and from the TSA and general security, that a lot of people thought that the plague mask was a good idea, and they kind of wanted one themselves. And since life likes to emulate movies all of a sudden, particularly propaganda films that they rub in our faces, it made you wonder what was in Resident Evil. And was there more to the story than just the lady in the red dress? Because Mila Jovovich, that well-trained monarch, with albeit stunning physique, was only there to lure you in and maintain the audience's observance while all sorts of esoteric symbols were placed in front of the screen. And not to underscore Michelle Rodriguez, because Michelle Rodriguez did a pretty good job in Resident Evil. In fact, you could say Michelle Rodriguez asserted dominance. Michelle Rodriguez asserted dominance just about everything she ever did. And personally, Michelle Rodriguez taught me the lesson that love is giving something, not giving up something. Though I don't think that she realized she taught me that. And I don't think I really realized it until just now. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Never mind that it comes with an old Klaus Kinski quirky meme that I made. Werner Herzog has absolutely nothing to do with this. Absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. Well, maybe. I mean, is that ever really true about Werner Herzog? The answer's not entirely clear. But the simultaneous synchronicity of the witch hunt with the coronavirus and the general resurgence of the disintegration of hope amongst many people is less and less the coronavirus or the Ebola or any number of memes that could become a serious threat to us, and more that we must look inward into our communities towards mass hysteria and make sure that we hold truth above all things and that we don't destroy each other and ourselves in the path to find that righteousness. Because that's usually what people do, by the way, in a witch hunt, is they destroy a bunch of innocent people, and then all of the evil people end up being the last to live. And then all of the evil people quietly resume control. Not to be negative, quite on the contrary, really, just to focus on the fact that we need to make sure that we're not provoking pestilence, and we need to be aware of those that do. We need to look beyond the negative static and see things for what they are: a lust for madness and evil, and an obsession and fetishization with them, guised in sheep's clothing as the protector, pretending benevolence and telling us, like Jeremy Irons, telling us to be prepared. Not unlike Bill Gates, who in this metaphor is performed by Jeremy Irons, the voice of Scar from The Lion King, and Humbart from Lolita, whom, as Bill Gates, in our surreality, has explained to us that anything, particularly anything terrible, can happen, and indeed it might and it will. And Bill Gates warns us that a plague, perhaps this next year, 2020, is likely, if not all but inevitable, to occur. And that due to the problems with the population, which is headed up to about 9 billion, that due to, if not in spite of, the vaccines that they produce, this inevitable calamity might be affected as to only destroy the lives of 100, perhaps up to 60 million individuals. This just being some sort of a hypothetical possibility that Bill Gates anticipates, of course, could happen, but of course it has. And like Bill Gates said, there was nothing that could be done about it, or if there could have, all it could do is maybe bring the numbers down to something a bit more manageable. But of course, it could happen, and it could happen to us. And by the way, that story about Michelle Rodriguez. So it's one time Sabri and I were in Venice Beach, and we were riding bicycles in our shorty shorts. And then there was Michelle Rodriguez with some nice girl. And we looked at them, and they looked at us. And then Michelle Rodriguez placed her arm around the girl as if to assert her dominance. And that's what I meant when I said Michelle Rodriguez asserted her dominance. As if to tell us that day that she owned more than just that bicycle, and indeed, I believed her. Plus, Blue Crush was such a real movie. I mean, Blue Crush is just like, that's what real life is like. If you've ever had a surfboard and worked in a hotel, Blue Crush is real. But this mass hysteria about a virus that's happening elsewhere is plenty of evidence, plenty enough provocation for people to start believing that maybe there's some sort of a sensationalization of the issues going on, something to be done in order to quarantine people and to take away more liberties from people, maybe even something to do to interfere with the election. I mean, anything that's taking up quality airtime from politicians that are talking about each other or their issues, that's clearly going to affect the election, right? So there's been a whole other side of the dialogue that's talking about the effects of just this idea of there being a plague and what social controls of China mean in terms of international trade and the alliances that are happening internationally with and against America. Whatever America you mean by that, whether you mean a discrete state or the current one, as temperamental yet as novel as it might be. Though I don't think that political motivation, particularly the American election, is the sole motivator. Not everything is about America. Some fads just come and some fads just go. But the story of this plague, of this virus, reminds me of another phenomenon of virus married into a mass hysteria, a story that's referred to as choreomania, or the Dancing Plague. The Dancing Plague happened in Strasbourg. Strasbourg was established as a Roman military outpost called the Argentinaratum by at least 128 BC. Strasbourg Cathedral began undergoing construction in the 12th century. A revolution in 1333 prolonged construction. The conflict resulted in Strasbourg declaring itself a free republic through a broad city government with the participation of the guilds. Only 15 years later, the deadly bubonic plague of 1348 scarred the face of Strasbourg forever. Several hundred Jews were publicly burnt to death in one of the worst pogroms in history. The Cathedral of Strasbourg was finally completed in 1439, though only the North Tower was built, and became the world's tallest building. surpassing the Great Pyramids of Giza. A few years later, a man in Strasbourg named Johannes Gutenberg created the first European movable type printing press, acknowledged in European history. Then on October 31st, Halloween of 1517, in what became known as the 95 Thesis, Martin Luther nailed to the door of a church the disputation of the powers and efficacy of indulgences, protesting what the false doctrines and malpractices within the church. In July 1518, the dancing plague incident struck residents of Strasbourg. The outbreak began when a woman called Frau Tarofea began to dance fervently in the streets, lasting somewhere between 4 and 6 days. Within a week, 34 others had joined, and within a month, there were around 400 dancers afflicted with choreomania, dancing constantly for weeks, most of them eventually dying from heart attack, stroke, or even exhaustion. The Holy Empire was unsure how to handle the situation. At first, they hid in their high towers. Eventually, they encouraged the dancing. They even lended a few musicians to play for them. But after a month of endless singing and dancing in days and nights on end, the church grew paranoid and terrified. Eventually, the Holy Empire decided to burn the city of Strasbourg to the ground with the dancers inside. The egotism of the dancing plague, conflict, and the Holy Empire's resolution serves for a metaphor for the struggles within certain young religious intellectuals within the Holy Empire leading to the Protestant Reformation. Argentoratum, or Strasbourg, lay just on the other side of the Black Forest, a marvelous, ancient, yet futuristic city. Highly advanced, with exceedingly beautiful sculptures, the highest towers, and the most advanced astronomical observances, astronomical clocks of the time. Argentoratum is also perhaps where Argentina gets its name, another interesting land of star forts, a confederation brought up earlier for their own coups in 1893. A land covered with a Phrygian cap underneath a sun god, which incidentally experienced a number of plagues of their own. Argentina had 99% of their indigenous population wiped out, and then centuries and generations, similarly for generations of immigrants, incessantly sent off to needless wars, conscripted, murdered, genocided, sterilized, kidnapped, making the population of Argentina today virtually unrecognizable from Argentina 500 years ago, or from 100 years ago for that matter. Argentina has been through so many changes. It's hard to recognize Argentina 10 years from the next. Yet, despite all that Argentina has been through, still filled with some of the more powerful people in the world. In fact, even the Pope comes from Argentina today. Something up until recently, a South American Pope that is, thought to be completely unheard of and impossible. But if there was going to be one, it made sense to be from Argentina. And the dancing plague also happened after a great period of liberty, so as to make many people believe that the reason for the plight was a life of freedom and fun and debauchery. So as to find a cure for this ailment meant a life reserved of piety and humility. This also led to people, beyond just eating their vegetables, hunting down those that did not conform to the social cues. And a great number of these witch hunts led to the deaths of innocent people, the rapes and drownings of young maidens, the burning and consumption even, sometimes of babies, and the murder even of simple educated, innovative, such as the case where a villager was burned for his greenhouse, which allowed him to grow vegetables in the dead of winter, a feat of agrarian capitalism, or at least self-interest, which was looked at by the local community as a form of Marxist heresy, and essentially Satanism. These sorts of witch hunts led people to distrust each other a great bit.
This program is coming to you via Relay 2 satellite, a spacecraft orbiting the Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour.
Recent Talk Terry.